let's jump right in.
Yeah.
Okay, we got impeachment articles filed against Department of Homeland Security leader Mayorkas. This is something that the Republicans have been pushing for a long time. They basically ran the midterm elections being like, we're going to impeach Mayorkas if you give us the majority. And so far, they've been very slow to do so. It's made people on the Republican base upset, and they've held a lot of Senate, confrontations and House confrontations with Mayorkas, pushing him on the border and border security. If you don't know, Department of Homeland Security is those in charge of kind of running the border, the whole asylum process. That's all under their jurisdiction. Deportations, that's all under DHS. So that's what Mayorkas is leading. And so the Republicans have finally filed impeachment against him. So it has two general charges against Mayorkas, but the overall bubble is that he is doing a poor job handling the border crisis. And to put this in perspective, this is coming at a time when the Republicans in the House are rejecting the Senate's deal for a border legislative compromise, right? So in the Senate, Chris Murphy of Connecticut, Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, and Lankford of Oklahoma have been working together to formulate a new immigration law that would really tighten up and restrict access from our southern border. It would put a number of caps on asylum seekers that could enter illegally, even through ports of entry, and then shut down the border if certain caps and limits are reached, right? So I think if it's, I'm not going to get these numbers right, but let's say if it's like 10,000 people cross in a day, the border gets shut down, right? So House Republicans have denied that, and now they are bringing up articles of impeachment. So there's two general charges. The first charge is the willful and systematic refusal to comply with the law. Now, this gets very into the weeds, and so I'm not going to go through every single point by point here. But the overall message here is that House Republicans are accusing Secretary Mayorkas of not following the proper Immigration and National Security Act procedures to deport illegal immigrants or restrict and hold asylum seekers for their court hearings. That is the general scheme. And this is mainly following in Section 25 BC and that whole section here. So the main thing they're upset about is catch and release. So the House is insisting that Secretary Mayorkas is running a catch and release scheme where those who are entered into the country, detained, then claim asylum, are then released into the United States pending their court hearing. So they aren't being held by DHS while they are waiting for their court hearing. Now, the Trump administration did not do that either. The Trump administration did not hold every asylum seeker in detainment prior to their court hearing. That's not what happened.
And no presidential administration ever has.
And the DHS does not have the resources to follow that type of restriction legally, right? They would have to break a lot of laws in terms of housing accommodation standards, sanitation standards. They just don't have the money to house the 300,000 people that have been crossing the border every month. They don't have the ability to do that. And so that's really, really important. They're also claiming that he is not following the correct protocol for expedited removal processes. So these expedited removal processes allow the United States to limit the amount of times that a detainee who is going to be deported gets to appeal their claim up to a court. So the House of Representatives under the Republican leadership wants Secretary Mayorkas and believes he should be utilizing this expedited removal proceeding much more than what he's currently doing. And so for that reason, that's another under this charge of general keeping the border open and not complying with the law. How true that is, that's going to be up to your interpretation of the law, but that's not exactly what I believe. Now, the next part here is talking about the second charge is the breach of public trust. So the first statement that they kind of go into here is that Mayorkas knowingly knowingly lie to the American public in House committee meetings saying that the border was secure, that the border was tight, that they had everything under control. And they say, because you've lied about these things, you've obviously don't have the border under control. You can't be trusted. Because you supported statements that Border Patrol agents were whipping people when that turned out not to be true, you have to be impeached. You lied knowingly. And then they pronounced that he's failed to comply with certain subpoena requests. That's definitely something that I don't like. I don't think a secretary should not comply with subpoenas if it's done by the House. So I understand that one, I guess. Then they talk about how because he terminated construction of the border wall, that is breaking the public trust, and that's under charge. I don't understand how not continuing the policy of a former president is due for impeachment. That's a different of opinion. That's why you go to the ballot box for. That's not an impeachment question. And then they out of nowhere they say this too, which I thought this was really funny. They said that he suspended the asylum cooperative agreements with El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, and other Latin American, South American countries. But it actually wasn't the DHS that suspended this. It was directly from the State Department. So this is not under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security. This came from Blinken and the rest of the State Department.
I also question the premise of that being an impeachable offense, or even part of the impeachable offenses.
Right, because it's supposed to be about high crimes and misdemeanors. So when we're getting into things like that, these sound like differences of opinion rather than overall illegal or unlawful activity, right? So they also say that like he abused his parole powers, that parole is only supposed to be granted on case-by-case bases, but instead the DHS has been paroling aliens in mass and giving parole programs and legal status to Ukrainians, Venezuelans, Cubans, Haitians, and other oppressed people.
I kind of take issue with that because unless it's the Biden administration as a whole that has been completely out of line in creating these parole programs. We've read and researched that they've granted access to tens of thousands of people from these places. So is that what they're saying? It's just that blatantly the parole is not allowed? Yeah,
because they when they look at the parole thing, they're looking very, very intensely on the phrase like case by case.
Yeah.
So because they're saying case by case, they really are interpreting that for individuals.
Okay.
Not rather like a geopolitical shock like the invasion of Ukraine or, because of the 200% inflation rate or whatever going on in Venezuela. That's not a case by case basis.
I can't completely disagree with that.
Well, I disagree with that. I think that is case by case.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's literally, we had the case of high inflation in Venezuela. So then we...
I guess, but I think you're kind of twisting words that people who speak English know how they're used.
Well, I don't know about that. I then we'd have to see like what's the precedent of how parole was used in the past.
True.
And we do know that parole has been utilized to grant legal status.
Okay, then I have no.
But then I guess their issue is you're doing it too much.
See that? Then I have a problem with their logic.
Right.
Right. Because there's if we've settled on case by case being okay as a matter of the case of the problem in this country, the problem for these people, right? The problem, I don't know.
Earthquake in Haiti.
Yeah. Or say Holocaust of Jews, right? Is that a case that is good enough to use for all the Jews that are trying to escape the Holocaust? I would think so.
Yeah.
So if you're okay with case by case in that context, then I don't think you can suddenly say, oh, but Biden has to be interpreting case by case as person by person. Yeah.
So they're going through with this impeachment thing. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think he'll probably get impeached in the House. He's obviously not going to get convicted by the Senate under no circumstances. But Mayorkas did a whole rebuttal and gave his whole argument, or at least the DHS gave their whole argument for why Mayorkas shouldn't be impeached. I recommend you go read it. Kind of outlined the points that we kind of just talked about here. There isn't too much of a difference, but...
The only other thing I'd mention as far as the making of false statements in congressional hearings, like lying about how secure the border is, for example, that seems like it at least could be a reach. I haven't watched the hearings myself, but it could be a reach because I have seen so many congressional hearings where when you go in there, like at least half of the congressmen in the hearing are going to be attacking you.
Yeah.
Like you're going to be on the defense. So it's kind of hard to be attacked with questions and then not defend the job you've been doing at all.
And also,
it seems like it would just be holding him to a higher unreasonable standard.
and let's put this in honest. Let's talk about this honestly here. He's a person who wants to keep his job.
Yeah.
Who's involved in political action.
Exactly. It's all
obviously
politics.
There's going to be spin.
Yes.
I mean, like, you can disagree. The border's secure. He could absolutely spin it and say it is secure. I don't necessarily agree with him, but I don't think that's an impeachable thing.
No. It makes me think of the people, like, if you can argue that Donald Trump truly believed that he won the election in 2020, and they've used that in like certain criminal proceedings as a defense for Trump, it's hard to argue that Mayorkas is knowingly lying about how he's done his job.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.